Okay, so this is a basic look at an elasticity of demand problem. And we went over this in class, and I want to go over it again. It is busy looking, and I get that, but it also is a great example of the pricing structure. So notice that our example here deals with, let's say, the price of a fancy dinner for one person at a restaurant. And right in the middle, just try to focus on the prices in the middle. Notice that prices go from $24 a person to 32 to 40 to 48 to 56. So the prices go up in value. These are different price structures. This restaurant can offer a meal at these different prices. And they have to kind of assume what are people going to demand, and the demanders are people who can make demands immediately. Always remember that. The demanders are the buyers. They are in a position to walk out of the restaurant, not buy, or whatever. With the suppliers, always remember this. They're more stuck to the supply side because they've already created the restaurant or made the car or produced the house. So the supply elasticity side is a little different than the demand side. But let's look at what happens. It's a classic law of demand issue. As prices move up in this scenario, the quantity demanded of each of the meals goes down. And that would make sense. It's an inverse relationship. And if you recall, the inverse relationship, look at my little hand here, we have the y-axis, which has dollars, and the x-axis, which has quantity. You're going to get an inverse relationship or a downward sloping curve. Because as prices move up, that variable moves up. The variable that we're watching, demand, is going to move down. People are going to want less at higher prices. But the question about elasticity is how much less? We know that using this equation on the bottom, anything below 1 means we have an inelastic situation, or buyers are not responsive as much to the price change. They're willing to buy more than the change in price. And anything above 1 indicates that buyers will reduce their quantity, or even sellers, compared to the change in price. So if you look at this equation down here, which I know I wrote equal, but equal really meant, equal was not different for either group. It was really a function of, you could use the same relationship for quantity supplied or quantity demanded. Either elasticity of demand or elasticity of supply uses the same equation. It's just that when you do elasticity of demand, you have to drop the negative sign because it's an inelastic, or because it's a downward sloping curve. You're going to have a negative. So elasticity of demand is going to be somewhat. They're going to be the same. It's going to be the same equation, different numbers obviously, but the same equation. But remember, on elasticity of demand, you drop the negative sign. But what are we really looking at? We're looking at the percentage change in demand compared to the percentage change in price. And as a business person, you'd want to know that, right? If I raise my prices, how much less are people going to buy, if they're going to buy less at all? I mean, there are situations, maybe with a life-saving drug, that you could raise your prices, and given the circumstance, people would even want more. But we know that, basically speaking, the law of demand states that people will want less as I raise my prices. That's just human nature. You charge more for something, I'm going to buy less of it, generally speaking. And that's what economics is, right? Generally speaking. So as I raise prices, notice what happens to demand. Demand drops. And that's to be expected. But how much does it drop? Well, if I use my equation, if I go from 32 to 24 in price, it's 32 minus 24, which is 6, divided by the product of both, which is 32 plus 24, which is 56. And what you're going to get is 14.2%. And the reason why you add both of these as the denominator is you want to get a central point. So just understand mathematically, we don't want to anchor it to one side or the other. We want to get the middle. So that's how we discuss that. And that's how we quantify it. And then if I go from 40 to 32, I'm going to have a change of $8 in price. And if I divide that by 72, I'm going to get 11%. So what I've done is I've consistently showed that I had a 14.2% rise in price in the first instance, 11.1% rise in the second instance. If you work the numbers from 48 to 40 using this denominator, I'm going to get a 9% rise, and I'm going to get a 7.6% rise. Now, in order to figure out the elasticity of demand, I have to do the same thing on the demand side. So when I raise prices from 24 to 32, my quantity demanded is going to go from 180 to 150. So I'm going to lose 30 dinners that I could sell. The difference is 30. Divided by 180 plus 150, which is 330, I'm going to get 9%. And if I follow through on that math, I'm going to see 11.4%, 14.2%, and the difference is 90 to 60 would be 30, again over 150, it'll be 20%. And when I divide, going back to this equation, when I divide this 9% loss in quantity by 14% change in price, I'm going to get an elasticity of demand that's below 1, which is 0.633%. So that means my buyers were less responsive to my price change. I raised prices by 14.2%. I only lost 9% of my dinners. That means I should make money. How do I confirm that? By the total revenue test, the TR test. I take the 180 times 24, and I was making 43.20 at 24. When I raise to 32, I'm now making 4,800. I am actually making money. I am inelastic. When I go to the next level, I actually have an equal movement. 11.1% of 11.1%, which is unit elastic. You very rarely see this in the real world. It's more theoretical, but it's an exact movement. And notice I go from making 4,800 to the same 4,800. My changing price did not affect my quantity. I did not change. When I move up another 9% now at 40 to 48, now I start losing money because a 9% movement in price results in a 14.2% drop in demand, and now you can confirm it with a loss. You always do the TR test versus demand because that's actually what you're selling. You never do it against supply. Always against demand because remember, the demanders make decisions and they decide what the revenue is. The supplier can only react and sell at different prices. And notice when I do this math on the supply side, by taking quantity supplied over price. At 24 to 32, I raise my supply by 19%, which means I'm elastic, which means I want to sell more. I'm very sensitive to price changes. It means as a supplier at 24 to 32, I would sell 19% more with a 14% move. But when I get to 32 to 31, I'm less elastic. I'm inelastic. And that makes some degree of sense from the supplier standpoint. Notice the supplier is inelastic at these higher levels because as a supplier, once I'm making a profit, like say from 24 to 32, I'm making a nice profit. Think about a restaurateur. I'm cleaning up my tables. I'm using my inventory. I'm not going to want to keep extra food waiting for more people to come or at higher prices. I'm going to or you own a stock and the stock moves up. Generally, most people, generally speaking, psychologically, once they get a good movement in the stock and they have a good profit, they take their money off the table. And then usually speaking, they have very little inventory left over as they move up, which kind of gives you like an idea of the psychology of supply. It's like when you're selling your house. You might want $500,000 for your house, and you might have the idea that someone could pay $550, but at $500 you're satisfied. Generally speaking, psychologically, and this is all psychology, people, once they have a good profit, is going to generally, as much as we say, everybody wants to maximize, there's a behavioral aspect of this, and they're going to say, I sold enough, or I sold my house at a certain price, or I sold my stock and I have a profit. Remember the old stock market adage, bulls make money, bears lose money, but pigs get slaughtered. And it really cuts down to nobody ever lost money taking a profit. The stock market being the most stark example of supply and demand. So it's the same thing with suppliers. They have inventory. They know they have to get rid of that inventory. If they can get a fair profit, they're going to have a lot less as prices move up. And notice how even when prices go from 48 to 56, their quantity supply goes up only 4%. Because they're starting to say, you know what, I only have a little bit left. I sold everything. I'm out. I could start fresh. So that kind of really gives you a good example of the supply and the demand equation. If you're taking a test that has to do with this, that's how you would do it. I would suggest you do the percentage changes of all of these variables and then divide to figure out your elasticity of demand. And then using this equation to get the elasticity of supply, remembering to drop the negative sign. We're only interested in the percentage change, not the negatives or the positives. And we confirm this by using a total revenue test that gives us demand over price. I will be making other videos on these economic principles, but I wanted you to understand this. Go over it. The reason why I gave you this busy format is I'd like for you to work out these numbers on your own. And you can always ask me questions in the comment box on YouTube. Thank you.